Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Ben on Sports. And as you can see, we have an NHL episode coming your way. I told you guys I was going to do one last regular season update at the trade deadline, and here it is now that the trade deadline is passed. A lot of cool stuff going on in the NHL, quite a few big trades. Again, love hockey, and it needs to be more popular. So if you are experimenting with the NHL, highly recommend you keep watching. Great sport with one of the best, if not the best, postseason in all the sports. So without further ado, let's look in my last update to see my final predictions on where I think the regular season is going to end. Here you go with the Metropolitan Division. You see current standings with where they are as time of recording on the left, with predicted standings on the right. The number in parentheses is how many games a team has played to let you know if somebody has games in hand to catch up with the people in front of them. I have the Capitals and Hurricanes staying put, hanging on to where they are because they have decent leads, and I think that they're better than the teams behind them. I think they're pretty much locked into that 1 and 2. For the Capitals, it comes down, will they win the President's Trophy? And even though in some respects that's been a curse, I feel like recently, I mean, name the last President's Trophy winner to make a deep playoff run or win a Stanley Cup. It's been a while, so maybe you don't want it for that reason. But Capitals are definitely a contender for it, and I think right now they're leading the league standings. I think they're tied for first with 92 points, but they've done it in less games, so they're definitely a contender there. And they didn't make any really significant moves at the trade deadline, but don't think they had to. I think they already had a deep team, and they didn't want to tap into their future, which looks like it has quite a few good prospects. Chiefly Ryan Leonard, once he gets through with the college season, will be joining the Capitals. It seems it'll be interesting to see what line he goes into and where his role lies with the team. You don't want to expect too much out of a rookie, but at the same time, he's not a normal rookie. He should be pretty good. Led the United States to back-to-back World Juniors titles, so very interested to see how Ryan Leonard plays for the Capitals, especially with the team chemistry being what it is. Hurricanes kind of had a trade deadline debacle with Mikko Rantanen. I think it made them a little bit worse in the short term, but is going to help them in the future with Stankoven and those first round picks. So, that said, it's not like they're a bad team because of it just means they lost a really productive player for them this season in Martin Niches. So we'll see. I don't think I think it hurts the Hurricanes this season, and I think starting next year they'll be on the okay side of that trade. Devils have had a lot of injuries. They started off hot, they slowed down. I still think they should be fine. I'm a little bit worried about the Devils slipping into the wild card and potentially missing the playoffs, but I think that they still have enough left on their team to comfortably make the playoffs. And then the Blue Jackets, who have been hot, super hot as of late, are catching the Devils. As you can see, they actually could be tied with the Devils at 74 points as they're back 4 points, but they have 2 games more left to play. So maybe even the Blue Jackets can catch the Devils. They've been super hot. I don't know if they will. Zach Werenski is looking like one of the best 2 or 3 defensemen in the league, helping to lead the Blue Jackets. They're definitely a surprise team. I picked them last to finish in the Metro, and I think a lot of people had them at or near the bottom of the Metro, but I don't see them fading away. I think at this point they've played well through 3/4 of the season, and I think that this is the team. We can expect them to continue to be the team that they have been and continue to fight for a playoff spot, most likely a wild card. The Rangers have done a lot of interesting things. I don't really know how to feel about them. They made a trade for JT Miller, which it was kind of a win now move, but they've also got rid of guys like Capo Caco and Ryan Lindgren. The Rangers are an interesting team, and I think they're not trying to rebuild. They're really trying to retool. I think they're just trying to reshape the makeup of their team, reshape what their team looks like, while still trying to stay competitive. And in theory, they can still make a playoff spot. I don't know if they will or not because it's a really, really competitive in the Eastern Conference. And there's some teams ahead of them that are probably in a little bit better shape, but only time will tell. It's definitely not impossible. And I'm definitely keeping an eye on the Rangers moving forward. The Islanders are in the playoff race firmly, I would say. They're not too far back of a wild card spot, But trading Brock Nelson, some of the other moves they made, it seems to me that they're going on a rebuild that they probably should have been going on for a while. Definitely good to get a head start on it with trading your best player, getting some good pieces back, getting the Avalanche's number one prospect and some picks. So while they aren't points wise too far out of it, I don't think it's realistic to expect them to compete, and I expect them to fall farther back in the standings. The Flyers, maybe they passed the Islanders, maybe they stay where they are. They made some moves to pick up picks, realizing, hey, even though we're really young, we're probably still not ready to compete yet. Let's keep stockpiling picks, some players. Let's free up some salary cap space. And it seems like that's what the Flyers have done this season. Definitely a team to keep an eye on moving forward, but as of right now, not a big threat. And honestly, for them, they probably want to keep losing games because it'll prepare them better for the draft lottery and potentially getting another high ceiling player. And then the Penguins, they've made some trades this year, kind of acknowledging. I think they're acknowledging maybe we can't compete this year, but they still have a lot of old vets that care more about winning a title than sitting through a rebuild, like Sidney Crosby, like Evgeny Malkin, like Erik Karlsson. They have a lot of these guys that their goal is still very much to win. And I think the Penguins do, but they're kind of going to need to do what their rivals, the Capitals, did, and kind of shift the roster makeup. See if you can find a way to shift, get rid of some older guys that you maybe not need. Try and get a youth movement, things like that, to try and just change the way your roster is constructed to still find ways to be competitive with your older but very experienced and battle tested roster. And potentially the Penguins could be getting a really good lottery pick, especially if they continue to finish last in the Metro, even though there's some divisions that have multiple teams that'll be worse than the Penguins. And it could help them get a really nice, young, dynamic piece that's ready to be an NHL player relatively soon. So if you're a Penguins fan, maybe you're not good this year, but maybe getting a high up number one pick could be the start of something for the future for your team. And as you can see, I think the four teams that are currently in the playoffs have a pretty good shot of finishing in the playoffs. I will say a lot of the Eastern Conference wildcard teams have like most of the toughest schedules left in the NHL. I believe the Blue Jackets are top 10 in difficulty of schedule remaining. There's a lot of Eastern Conference teams fighting for a wild card spot that are top 5 in difficult schedule remaining. So these Eastern Conference wildcard teams, with the Blue Jackets being one of them, have a lot of tough games left that they are going to need to find a way to get maximal points out of. Moving on to the Atlantic, the Panthers made some pretty big trades at the trade deadline, I would say. Picking up Seth Jones and Brad Marchand is going to be of chief importance, or of chief notoriety, I guess is another way to say that. But the Panthers also have some injuries, and now they have a suspension all of a sudden of their best defenseman for PEDs. It's 20 games, so he'll be out the rest of the regular season, but should essentially be back in time for the playoffs. So that's good. You're still worried about Matthew Tkachuk. Great Four Nations performance and was performing well with his brother until, of course, he got hurt. And it seems like that injury is going to keep him out for the rest of the regular season. Maybe he comes back. Who knows? But definitely back in time for playoffs. And I'll tell you what, I do not want to see a line with two of the three, potentially all three. I don't know if they'll put all three on the same line, but a team that has Sam Bennett, Matthew Chuck, and Brad Marchand is not a team I want to play. That sounds like an awfully annoying line. A really good line. They're going to be good defensively. They're going to be good offensively, and they're going to annoy the ever-living crap out of you. So definitely interested to watch for the Panthers. I think the biggest thing for the Panthers is getting healthy and also getting guys back from PED suspensions. And then once you get healthy, making sure you coalesce. Is there enough time to do it before the playoffs? Well, probably not with how many guys are going to be out, but they're going to have to do it on the fly. But good culture, good coaching, good players usually can do it faster than bad culture, selfish players, and bad coaching. So that's really the challenge for the Panthers the rest of the season. They definitely still have one of the most talented rosters in the NHL. The Maple Leafs made some moves, not anything earth-shattering. They're still a playoff team. I don't think they have to worry about falling to the wild card. I think the top three in the Atlantic say the top three, and I feel like they've been the top three for a while. They're consistently all at the top three, at least the last 5 or 6 years, it feels like. Maple Leafs have a good team. I expect it to be no different this year. And then the Lightning at 78 points, just five back at the Panthers, but they have one game at hand. Uh, Chief important for the Lightning is, well, they've made one trade that I'll talk about a little bit later. Maybe they didn't get all-star or a high-level player, but they have a lot of nice depth pieces. The Lightning also still have most of their core, maybe not Stamkos, but they still have most of their core from their three straight appearances to the Stanley Cup and winning two of those. The Lightning know how to win in the playoffs. They still have that core there. It's still a very good team. And Vasilevsky always turns it on come playoff time. Lightning are a very good team that I think got even better at the deadline. They're another hot team. And in fact, as you can see in my predicted standings, I think the Lightning are better than the Maple Leafs, and they will catch the Maple Leafs. Not only that, but I think because the Panthers are still figuring things out, and because of their injuries and the suspension, I think that the Lightning can actually catch the Panthers, because I think it's going to hurt the Panthers' ability to consistently win games. Or I don't see them being as efficient as they have been. And I think the Lightning are players to finish first, and I have them in the Panthers essentially duking it out until the final day of the season. Maybe even the Lightning. I think on terms of three teams competing for a division title, this could be the best division in terms of watching the division race down the stretch. Then we get to the wild card teams from this division, and right now it's kind of the Senators. They have a couple of games worth of room in between them and the next team. And what I mean by a couple of games worth of room is they have a 5-point lead, which isn't humongous, but it takes at least 3 games to make that up. So the Senators have a little bit of a cushion, which makes me feel good about them potentially being the wild card team. But nothing is written in stone because, as I said, the Senators have a pretty tough schedule, as do most of the wild card teams. But I'd like the Senators to hold their wild card spot and make the playoffs. It's just a question of, are they going to be the first or second wild card? Because as you can see, I don't see them, nor do I think will be able to catch up with the teams at the top of this division. The Canadiens, still a surprise team. I was predicting them to fall off last update I did, and they didn't fall off as much as I thought they would. I do think they're going to slow down a little bit, but they certainly have some young guys playing well. And I don't see this being the year they make the playoffs, but I see them being really in a really good position heading into next season. They have a lot of great young pieces that are only going to continue to get better. And I think a playoff hunt at the end of the season could help prepare them for next year. And it's always good to know what that feeling is like when you have more pressure being in a playoff hunt late season. I just don't know if they're going to be able to catch all the way up to the Senators. And in fact, I think the Red Wings could pass them. The Red Wings, a little bit more veteran, expected to be a playoff contender this year, hasn't quite come to fruition. They didn't make any massive deals at the deadline, in my opinion. I'm interested to see what happens with the Red Wings, because they're definitely not out of their window, but they definitely have to make moves for some more pieces, or their window will be closed. They're still young enough, but it seems like there's some younger teams that might be ready to pass them and jump them in the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference. Keep an eye on the Red Wings. I think they do get by the Canadiens. I think the Red Wings make a charge, but I don't think they are going to quite get to playoff position. The Bruins, they could have fought for a playoff spot, but it looked like they were just kept drifting further and further back. And they opted to say, you know what, we need a retool. We need a rebuild around Pastrnak. Get rid of some of our older veteran pieces. Get younger, get newer. And, I mean, really, obviously, this is the key one. Get better. Bruins, I'm not even counting as a playoff contender. They get rid of Marchand. They get rid of Carlo. They get rid of a lot of their what has been their core for the last however long you want to say. Picking up a lot of picks, some good young players, and more importantly, they could have some salary cap space the next couple of years going forward. And then the Sabres, they're just the Sabres. I don't have a lot to say. Heading for another lottery. They made some trades. They got rid of Dylan Cousins, who looked like a promising young piece. They got another one back, kind of a player swap with them and the Senators. Talk about that deal a little bit later, but The Sabres need to find something because you still have some great young players, and you need to figure out how to build around them so you can be competitive in this super competitive Eastern Conference. Moving on to the Western Conference, the Central Division, which might have another really good race for the top uh, three spots in or the top spot from the top three. The Avalanche might be a little bit too far back to make this a race, but who knows? The Jets, who have been the best team essentially all season, but when you have the start they did, you're kind of just trying to stay there. The Stars might be the best team in the NHL right now. The Avalanche could also be one of the best teams in the NHL. There's a very real possibility that the Central Division has three of the best 5 or 6 teams in the NHL. I would not want to be in this division fighting for the division lead. And really, uh, the 1, 2, and 3 part of this division could be an absolute bloodbath come playoff time where all the teams are so good and they're battling each other so hard that the other side of the West in the Pacific Division has an easier time dealing with them because they don't have to expend as much, at least in theory. Some people aren't a believer in that theory that every game is hard in the playoffs, and that's probably true to an extent as well. Avalanche and Stars both making some great trade deadline deals. Some weren't necessarily on the day of the deadline, but they both have made some great trades to make their teams better. None of them have any glaring weaknesses. I think I trust the Stars goaltending a little bit more. And then the Jets, I mean, they've been, like I said, they've been the best team in the NHL pretty much the entire season. They've been the President Cup's favorite essentially the entire season. But the one thing I see is, I mean, they didn't make a move for anybody at the deadline, but maybe they didn't have to. When you have the best goaltender in the NHL and you have two guys who are top 10, top 5 goal scorers this season in the NHL, maybe you don't need to do a whole lot. Then the Wild are dealing with some injuries. Unfortunately, because of how good the other 3 teams are, I don't think they're going to get out of that wild card threat, but I do think they're going to finish with the wild card spot number 1 because it's like those other 3 teams are tier 1 teams and they're like tier 2 or like tier 1B and they're tier 1A. Wild are a good team, especially when healthy. And honestly, for the Wild, I think the thing that's most important for them is just finding a way to get healthy. The Blues, I feel like, have been in this middling spot for a while where I don't really know what to think of them. They're good enough to make a run at the wild card. They're not good enough to win a division, and they're not bad enough to get a super good lottery pick. I don't know what the next step is for the Blues. They're one of the most confusing teams in the NHL for me. They can play spoiler. I don't see them making a run to make the playoffs. As you can see in my predicted standings, they're not in red. Who knows? Team to watch going forward, I guess. But what maybe they trade some guys, and honestly, in the offseason, I think they need to consider maybe not blowing it up, but trying to get younger and do what some of a team like the Bruins and teams like the Rangers are doing, and I think they'll be better set up for the future. Utah Hockey Club, I think, recognize where they are. Technically in the playoff hunt, but not really. And even if they did make it, would they do anything? Made some trades to get picks and young guys, and I think I like that decision for the Utah Hockey Club. Hopefully they use those picks wisely, and hopefully they get a freaking mascot. So because Utah, I hate saying Utah Hockey Club, just like I hated saying Washington Football Team. Hopefully honestly, that should be the first thing they figure out over the offseason is what the heck their logo is going to be so people can start using it. And then they can start finding out free agents and figuring out who they want to draft. The Predators, oh man, I was high on them coming into the year. A lot of people were. They've made a lot of big name free agent signings and it just hasn't panned out. Maybe it's almost like a cautionary tale for teams that try this in the future that you can't just sign a whole bunch of new free agents and add it to what you have and hope to get good. But then there's some teams that have had success doing that. The Predators, I think they were really more trying to shred salary because I still think they hope next season they're competitive, and you kind of have to be with some of the deals they made last offseason. They're going to have to hit in the draft, and they could get a pretty high draft pick. I mean, they have one of the lowest point totals in the NHL. And then you get a nice young developable piece with all those old veterans that know how to win. Maybe the Predators could be doing something next year. They did the right thing at the trade deadline. They're not going to make a push for the playoffs. I don't even think it would be possible with how far back they are. Look for the Predators in the lottery, potentially in the top 5 lottery with a lot of talent already on the roster. And then the Blackhawks, they added some great young pieces. They've recently had another young player debut this week. I love the trade they got for Spencer Knight. Spencer Knight, honestly, I thought has been good enough to be one of the best goalies in the NHL the last 3 or 4 years. And the Panthers have Bobrovsky, so why would you want to waste it? Knight just goes out and gets a 41 save shutout for the Blackhawks. What an introduction to the team. Again, Blackhawks getting young, and it looks like they're starting to be light at the end of the tunnel, not because they're getting good, but because you can see all of these young pieces, plus whoever they get in the draft this year, because they're heading for a top 5, top 3 pick. They're definitely going to have some of the best odds in the NHL at the number 1 pick. Blackhawks could be cooking, and they could be really good in 3 or 4 years. Only time will tell. And you can see I actually have the Stars catching the Jets. Not that I think the Jets are bad. I just think the Stars are that good. And ever since the start, the Jets are still good, but they haven't been as good. And I think the Stars are just, especially as the team coalesces, are going to be so good. They're going to have the best top 6, maybe the best top 9 in the NHL. Yes, better than the Oilers, who have McDavid and Draisaitl. Those top lines for the Stars can just be so ridiculous after the trades they made. They have a really good goalie, and I think the Stars could even make a run at the President's Trophy. And I think the Avalanche could be just as good, but I think they're a little bit too far back to make a meaningful run. I look for all 3 of these teams to be Stanley Cup contenders. Last division in the NHL, the Pacific Division. For a while, I really liked the Oilers to beat out the Golden Knights, but the Oilers aren't necessarily flailing, but they're kind of just treading water at the moment, and the Golden Knights have been able to open up again just a couple points with a game in hand. Golden Knights have the inside track to beating the Oilers and winning the division, guarantee them a matchup with a wild card team. Maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe it is. Excuse me. But yeah, I think this could put the Oilers against the Kings. Tell me if you've heard that matchup in the first round before. And honestly, the Kings are in a position now where if the Oilers keep on treading water, the Kings could pass them. They win their next 2 games, they're past them at game 64. So keep an eye out for the Kings to catch the Oilers. Again, the Oilers have that top 2 pairing, or not that, but those top 2 centers that make for the great power play that everybody needs to keep an eye on. It's just about who else can come and help them. And honestly, as it was last year, can the goaltender step up? I'm still worried about the Oilers goaltending. They didn't make any significant trades at the deadline. So I don't know if they have that piece on their roster or not. The Kings, as always, an excellent defensive team. The Flames have kind of surprised me. I thought they were going to be one of those teams that, was outside of the top 10 in draft odds, but also not good enough to make the playoffs. And right now they're hanging on to the playoff spot over the Canucks, and as you can see, I actually have the Canucks passing the Flames. I think that is your battle for the last wild card between the Flames and the Canucks. I don't think anybody's going to catch either of those teams. And fun fact, the last update I did, you guys listened to, the Flames and the Canucks had played the same amount of games, and the Canucks were back of the Flames by 1 point. In this update, the Flames and the Canucks have played the same amount of games, and the Canucks are still trailing by 1 point. I still think the Canucks get by the Flames. It's going to be a really fun battle, I think, between those 2 teams to see who comes out with the final wildcard spot. Granted, even if you get it, you're going to most likely get whoever wins the Central Division, and that's setting yourself up with a nice and difficult first round matchup. The Ducks have been playing pretty well as of late. Another team that I think is trying to really build more towards the future and try and get a nice draft pick. They actually have passed the Kraken in the standings since the last update. I don't expect the Ducks to go up. Maybe they can go back down to the Kraken. Maybe they don't. But Ducks are heading for the lottery, trying for top 6 to 8 odds. And really, for a long time, I thought they were going to be top 5 odds for the number 1 pick. Kraken made some deals at the trade deadline. Kind of gave some teams some good players. Got a lot of picks in return. I'm trying to remember. I didn't write down in my notes if they got any players of note. Maybe that means I don't think they got any players of note, but they definitely got a lot of picks. They're definitely going to have an opportunity to get a quality, high level prospect in the draft. Kraken kind of made the playoffs, were contenders for a little bit, kind of have fallen down by the wayside, and I think the Kraken need a definitive franchise player, somebody you can build 10 years of your future, 10 plus years of your future around, and maybe they can get that with a high draft pick. Granted, you could argue they already have at least two guys on their team that are that, so maybe it's just about adding to the young guys you already have on the team. And then the Sharks, another team, you got the guy that surefire looks like the best rookie in the NHL this season with Macklin Celebrini. Uh, they're trying to get a top 3 pick, potentially even the number 1 pick to pair with him. Sharks are another team that made some deals through trades to get some picks. I guess it's kind of, let's see, like it is with a lot of these teams. What do they do with the picks? Let's see what they do with the picks. And that's kind of where the Sharks are at. You have to hit on your picks, free up some salary cap space, and build around your young superstar. That is it for the standings. Let's move on to the wild card races. So last update, there was 8 teams in the Eastern Conference that I identified in the wild card race, and only 4 in the Western Conference. Since then, some teams in the Eastern Conference have dropped out, and I have an addition in the Western Conference by the name of the Utah Hockey Club, who I think it's fair to say they're only 3 games back, or only 3 points back, could in theory make a run. But let's start with the Eastern Conference. As you can see, I said the Senators and Blue Jackets, I think, are feeling a little bit more comfortable. The only team within 1 game's reach of the Blue Jackets is the Rangers, and they've played 1 more game. So the Senators and Blue Jackets do have a couple games down between them and the next couple teams, which is why I feel comfortable in saying they're going to make it. But, one rough stretch, 1 5 or 6 game cold stretch for either of the teams, or a super hot stretch for 5 or 6 games from some of these teams below them, and all of a sudden, you're tied or 1 point back or only 1 point ahead and have a whole bunch of pressure on you again. So anything can happen over here. But like I said, I think the Senators and the Blue Jackets have the inside trail here. They just have to continue to play good hockey, play well. And once again, I'll remind you one last time, in this Eastern Conference, I believe all 5 of these teams have 5 of the top 8 to 10 hardest schedules. So it's going to, whoever wins this wild card race is definitely going to earn it, because they're going to have to go through a lot of good teams and get a lot of points against good teams and able to get there. And then with the Western Conference wild card race, nothing too crazy with strength of schedule. Some of these teams are up there, some of them aren't. Again, the Wild have kind of put themselves away from the pack. I think the Wild feel comfortable, even with their injuries, about getting that first wild card seed. They just can't fall off a cliff. And then the second one is really where most of the action is. You have the Flames and Canucks right there. The Blues are only 1 point back, but they've played 2 more games, so I expect to see a little bit more separation. And I've already kind of acknowledged the Utah Hockey Club. They're technically in it, but kind of not really. Like I said, I really think this is going to come down to the Flames and the Canucks battling for the second wild card spot. And boy, that should be fun to watch, in my opinion. So assuming the standings end up the way I think it is, this is going to be the theoretical playoff bracket. I'll start in the Eastern Conference as I normally do. And if anybody out there is a Western Conference fan that gets offended, I always do Eastern Conference first in the NHL. It's because in my head, the Eastern Conference goes first because the time is earlier. It's so stupid, I know. But it's just in my head, all the Eastern Conference games start first because they're in the East, not the West. So I do the Eastern Conference first. Not trying to hate the Western Conference. I've been giving a lot of Western Conference teams praise. It's really just because the Eastern Conference always plays first when I'm watching, so I think about them first. You can see Capitals, Blue Jackets, first round. Would be great for the Blue Jackets just to make the playoffs, but I think the Capitals have enough in the tank to beat them. If you're the Capitals, I don't think you want to see the Senators, who are a wild card team right now, because I don't know if you know this, they've played 3 games this season. All 3 have gone to overtime. Capitals have won 2 of them, but obviously the Senators play the Capitals really well. That could be a really scary first round matchup for the Capitals. Hurricanes and Devils, honestly, 2 teams that I think are worse now than they were just last update. Obviously, the whole Rantanen thing kind of hurt the Hurricanes a little bit, but they're still a good team, very good team. Not disrespecting, they're still a very good team. and next year they're even going to be even better. And then the Devils just have so many injuries, so I think the Hurricanes take that one, as everybody I think kind of expects them to. Um, Panthers and Maple Leafs in the 2-3 Atlantic spot. I just see the Panthers being too much, even with more new pieces and more new guys having to do things. I think that they coalesce pretty quick as a team. The Panthers also have been here. They've been to 2 consecutive Stanley Cup finals. I think the Florida Panthers get it done. Although these two teams have seen each other a lot, could be a 7-game, very physical first-round series. But in that situation, I'm still trusting the Panthers over the Maple Leafs, which is a change because I have been having the Maple Leafs making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, at least winning first round most of the season. And then I see the Lightning being too much for the Senators to handle. Lightning move on. And then who would have thought a Battle of Florida in the playoffs? That's never been seen before. The Battle of Florida in the playoffs. This time, I think the Panthers get the Lightning in what would be one of the best hockey playoff series. Honestly, it might even be better than the Stanley Cup final, depending on how a couple of things go. 7-game series with 2 very well put together teams, 2 very deep teams. And then I see Florida. They're trying to win back-to-back cups, defend their title. I see Florida barely eking by the Lightning. And in this matchup, I have the Lightning as the higher seed, just in case you were curious. And then the Capitals and the Hurricanes on the other side. I had been picking the Hurricanes. Hurricanes are known as playoff chokers. They're known playoff chokers, but the Capitals kind of are too. I saw some comments on my last video. The Capitals have not won a playoff series since they won the Stanley Cup in 2018, and they've been to the playoffs all but one of those years. Now, they haven't been the favorite in all of those series, but they barely have won any games in those series. So it's not like the Capitals have been very great in the playoffs, and even before they won the Stanley Cup, they were kind of known as playoff chokers. So you got 2 teams that are kind of not known for playoff success, especially in the modern era. But I think the Capitals are a little bit better. Capitals, I think, play the Hurricanes well. They still have some matchups this year that'll be, maybe a little bit more telling about how they match up. I like the Capitals to beat the Hurricanes. They've been better all season. Leaving a Capitals-Panthers matchup now. The Panthers are coming off a super long win streak over the Capitals the last couple of years, but the Capitals have beaten the Panthers more than the Panthers have beaten them this year. I think there's still one more matchup between the two of them. I think the Panthers win this one, and I don't think it goes 7 games. It's not a sweep, but it doesn't go 7 games. I don't know if all the young guys in the Capitals are quite ready for Eastern Conference final level hockey, and I think the Panthers have just more star power on their roster to propel them to the Eastern Conference finals. Now, I'm going to go to the West, and in the quadrant, in this upper right quadrant, the central quadrant of this bracket, I think is like the death quadrant, if that makes sense. I think Vancouver makes the playoffs over the Flames, and they might get swept. Maybe it's a gentleman's sweep by the Stars. The Stars are really good. I'm really, really high on the Stars. Stars over the Canucks. And then the Jets and the Avalanche in the 2-3. Phenomenal series. Jets have been one of the best teams all year. But I think the Avalanche are really good, and their best player, they'll have the best player in the series in Nathan MacKinnon. The Avalanche won a Stanley Cup title not that long ago. A lot of that core is still there. They still know how to win in the Stanley Cup, or in the playoffs, rather. And I think that the Avalanche squeak by the Jets in a great series. And then finishing off this quadrant, Stars versus Avalanche. That might be the new best series. I was talking about the Battle of Florida. I think the Stars and Avalanche would be the best series in the NHL playoffs, and I'm looking at all the other predictions I have. I think regardless that the Stars and the Avalanche, you're going to see a lot of incredibly talented, incredibly skilled players, a lot of speed, some of the best defensemen in the game, and you're going to see one of the best goalies in the game for the Stars. Incredible. This would be an incredible matchup. And I think the Stars squeak by the Avalanche. I think the Stars are a tad bit deeper, and I trust their goaltending a little bit more than I trust the Avs goaltending. For those reasons, I think the Stars squeak by in an electric 7-game series. Now going to the Pacific quadrant of the bracket. Knights versus Kings. Fun series. Vegas versus LA. Knights have been the better team all year. Knights won a Stanley Cup 2 years ago. Think the Knights get by the Kings in this playoff matchup. Wild having a pretty good season, right? Not even if they get healthy, I don't think they're going to be good enough to beat the Oilers 4 times in 7 games. They're going to be good enough to get them a couple times, not good enough to beat them 4 out of 7. Think the Oilers move on to play the Knights. Knights Oilers, the top 2 teams in the Pacific. It feels like they usually are the last couple seasons. Have been the top 2 teams essentially all season. And I just think Event McDavid has to get that Stanley Cup eventually. Draisaitl has to get the Stanley Cup eventually. I know the Knights have been better most of the year. I think the Oilers are a little bit better prepared for playoff hockey. I also think the Oilers got a taste of the Stanley Cup last year and are hell-bent on making it back. I like the Oilers to beat the Knights. And then another great playoff series here in the Western Conference Final, Stars versus Oilers. I've had the Oilers winning the Stanley Cup since the beginning of the season. My last update, I had the Oilers winning the Stanley Cup. But I think the Stars are good enough and the Stars are able. And I think they stop the Oilers from even making it to the Stanley Cup. And another 6-7 game series. Again, I'll trust the Stars goalie a little bit more. But Draisaitl and McDavid are not easy to beat, and they're not easy to beat that many times. Still going to pick the Stars. Those first 2 lines, even really 3, you could argue, are fantastic. It's going to be hard to stop the Stars consistently on defense, especially as they figure out your game plan throughout the course of a series. I like the Stars to beat the Oilers in a close one. Leaving me with a Stars and Panthers. Can the Panthers repeat? Both. I think this is going to be a little. I think the Panthers are really good defensively. They're pretty good offensively. I think the Stars are really, really good offensively and just okay, pretty good defensively. Both of these goaltenders are really good, and I just think the Panthers might not have enough time to coalesce because of the injuries. I know the Stars have a lot of new pieces, but they're all healthy and nobody's suspended. The Panthers have also had a lot of long runs in the postseason, and I think eventually that adds up. I think for all those reasons, the Stars win the Stanley Cup final over the Panthers in 6 games. Now, I'm talking about the trade deadline and all these trades. Here I have my top 10 trades, the ones that are most important. There's some ones that are left off the list, but these are the ones I want to talk about. The first 2, obviously, dealing with Mikko Rantanen, who probably is the best player that was dealt, at least actively, somebody that you know will show up in the playoffs. So I feel like the trade season really got kicked off when Rantanen went to the Hurricanes for Nichas, Drury, a 2nd-round pick, and a 4th-round pick going back to Colorado. And all of and that was a lot, right? And Nichas has been one of their best players, and he's still super young. But you're like, he's not as good as Rantanen. We'll make a playoff run with Rantanen, and hopefully we can re-sign him. And it turned out that he didn't really want to sign in Carolina, it sounds like. So they gave up a lot to not really get him, and they ship him off to Dallas for Stankoven, one of the best rookies in the NHL this season, 2 firsts and 2 thirds. Now, does this make the Hurricanes worse this year? Yes. I think there's a world where the Hurricanes should have just let Rantanen play out the rest of the season. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, play out the rest of the season with us. Let's see if we can make a cup run. We have the pieces pretty much at every other position. You're going to be the star scorer. Let's see if we can win a Stanley Cup, and then you'll be free to enter free agency. A lot of teams do that, even giving up a lot this much. But I guess Carolina said, you know what, with how much we gave up, we need a guarantee of the future. So they go call up the Stars. The Stars get the deal done, and they get it back a pretty darn good haul in what is almost effectively a 3-team trade, I would say. Dallas giving up their prized young player, 2 firsts and 2 thirds. I think the Hurricanes made out okay, and in the long run, they might end up doing better than they would have if they just had Rantanen to begin with. And for Dallas, they have a lot of long-term future already, and they're short-term good. So this is going to help them both short-term and long-term. They got the contract extension done. I know they have a lot of other ones to dish out soon, but look at their top six wingers, man. I don't know if any other team in the NHL competes with that after the addition of Rantanen. Arguably, their top nine, you can go down and say the same thing for. Dallas going all out for a Stanley Cup. I love to see it. And then another team going all out for a Stanley Cup with the Avalanche. Primarily, the important thing here is that they got Brock Nelson. For Klingington, their top prospect in Richie, and a first and a third. So they gave up quite a bit. And if you're the Islanders, you got to be happy with this deal, even though you're giving up a really good player, a pretty legendary player in the eyes of many Islanders fans. You're getting a top-notch prospect and a first-round pick. That's a pretty darn good deal, I would say, along with some other things. It helps set the Islanders up for the future, helps start the rebuild in a post-Brock Nelson world. Island and helps the Avalanche say that that's our second-line center behind McKinnon. In the way the NHL is, the way the game of hockey is played, it's so vitally important to have top-level centers if you want to be competitive. So the Avalanche went out and got a top-level center to go behind McKinnon, who is one of the best centers in the league. Watch out for the Avalanche. They did a lot at the trade deadline. This is not the last trade that we're going to hear from them. Avalanche going all out to win a Stanley Cup, just like their division rival, the Stars are. Brad Marchand, Mr. Boston Bruin, getting traded from the Bruins, going to Florida for a second-round pick that can turn into a first-round pick. You feel like you maybe could have gotten a little bit more if you're Boston, but at the same time, maybe you can't because it's not the Brad Marchand of just a couple years ago. It's still a really good Brad Marchand, and the Panthers certainly have a mean team, and you can see what they think the identity of that team is. And I definitely think Marchand fits that identity. Not that they necessarily need a veteran presence because they just won a Stanley Cup, but it does add another veteran presence to a loaded roster. Great move for the Panthers in a win-now scenario. You see Charlie Coyle and a fifth-round pick going to Colorado for Middlestat, Zellers, and a second-round pick. Another pretty good prospect in Zellers, and another pretty high pick going back to Boston, and now Boston is collecting players and picks, as I was talking about earlier, to try and set themselves up for the future. And the Avalanche get another great piece to try and help them win another Stanley Cup. I don't know how many of these pieces the Avalanche will be able to hold on to long term, but they certainly have an absolute whale of a team right now. I look forward to seeing the Avalanche make another run. The problem is, again, for Dallas and Colorado, they both arguably did more than any other team at the deadline. And they could play each other in the second round, meaning one of these teams isn't going to make the Western Conference Finals, which does kind of suck. But I love when a team goes all in, and both of these teams have done that. Moving on to another pretty important one that happened in January. It happened not at the deadline, but it is a trade deal that I want to talk about. JT Miller going to the Rangers, and at this point I was like, oh wow, maybe the Rangers are trying to save their season. Maybe the Rangers are trying to make a big move. JT Miller is a highly coveted name for a lot of contenders. But then they paired it with a lot of, and you can see here there's a lot of movement going both ways. A lot of players, a first-round pick going back to Vancouver, which is a pretty good haul, and Vancouver still staying in the playoff hunt even without JT Miller. And I just think that the Rangers are using this trade as a way to, as I said, restructure their team how they want it. I think they're trying to just, you can see with a lot of their trades, they're moving guys out, bringing guys in. I think they're trying to free up cap space for free agency, and I think they're trying to retool and be aggressive about how they want to reshape the way their team looks. I think they decided during this season, after watching them go on that cold stretch, that the way the core was built, they weren't going to be able to win. We're going to create a new core that we think will be able to be more competitive. And JT Miller is obviously a great addition. There's definitely a lot of teams who also wanted JT Miller. Seth Jones and a 4th-round pick going to the Panthers for Spencer Knight and a 1st-round pick. And if you're Chicago, Seth Jones, you could argue, is arguably overpaid. I do believe they are retaining some salary in this deal, but you're getting Spencer Knight in a 1st-round pick. Spencer Knight's probably the best goalie prospect in the NHL. He's had some NHL time. He's a phenomenal young piece who, as I just said, had a 41 save shutout and what should have been his first appearance with the Blackhawks. And they're picking up a 1st-round pick, even if it's not in the top 20 because of how good the Panthers are. 1st-round pick is a 1st-round pick. This is going to help accelerate the rebuild for the Blackhawks. This is a great trade to get out from underneath a big contract and pick up an absolute stud and a 1st-round pick for you to do some damage with. Really, I'm only number 8, Dylan Cousins, essentially for Norris. The Cousins for Norris is essentially the main part of this deal between Buffalo and Ottawa. They're really swapping, I would say, young promising players that have had good seasons, but it seems like they can't figure it out with the current stature of the team. I lean to say Cousins is a little bit better. Only time will tell. Hopefully for both of these guys, it ends up being that they find their footing with a new organization and they continue to have a great career. The rest of the players are kind of whatever, kind of important. A lot of 1-year cheap deals. But I guess Ottawa's hoping that the change of scenery gets Cousins going and can help them make a playoff push and maybe a surprising playoff run. And I think this one's kind of underrated. Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci to Dallas for a 1st and a 3rd. Another great job to add some draft capital for the San Jose Sharks. Again, anytime you have draft capital, it gives you a chance to draft the guys you want, add some prospects, add some guys that'll be cheap and controllable, and hopefully be contributors at the NHL level. And with the 1st-round pick, you want them to be significant contributors for 2 guys that weren't going to help the Sharks now. And Granlund, I think, is a great pickup for Dallas. He's a guy that can score some goals. He's a great winger, has playoff experience. I think that's actually a really good addition that's going to get overshadowed by the Rantanen addition. Great pickup from Dallas. And it just is even more so shows that they're really going for it this year. And then this one is a 3-team trade. The most important part of this trade is that Tampa, is getting Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde, a defenseman, a forward, 2 great pieces that have playoff experience. 2 guys that the Lightning are like, yeah, maybe they're not number 1 guys, but they're great depth pieces. They're veterans that have playoff experience. They're going to add depth, and they're reliable skaters that can take up a lot of time and just play the game the right way. And they gave up a lot. They gave up 2 firsts, a 2nd, are going back to Seattle. That's the main return. And then Detroit gets a 4th-round pick in this, and they're essentially, I think, their whole thing is they're retaining salary for Yanni Gourde. It was a weird 3-team trade situation. They kind of got Gourde and then shipped him off. I think this is a great trade for the Lightning. Sometimes it's not about the star level caliber players that you're getting, but who you're surrounding your existing star level players with. And that is 2 great additions for the Lightning, making that team more dangerous. And as always, anytime I do a season outlook or a season update, I do power rankings and award races. My top 10 teams, a lot of movement from the last time. Oilers going from 1st to 6th. I have the Stars coming up to 1, Capitals and Jets, the two President's Trophy contenders that have been there for like 2 months at 2 and 3. The Avalanche after their moves, I have at 4. The Golden Knights holding steady as a top 5 or 6 team. Oilers, like I said, down to 6. Panthers up to 7 after their moves, but I didn't want to move them too high because they have injuries and a suspension. The Lightning entering the top 10. Hurricanes moving down, and the Wild going down to 10. These, I think, are all also actually the 10 best teams in the NHL. I think your top tier is probably that top 5 or 6. maybe even 7. I don't think all 10 of these teams can necessarily win a Stanley Cup, but we're talking about regular season, who I think right now is good, who's playing well, who made the good trade deadline moves. This is where I have my power rankings. Hart Trophy, nothing has really changed here for me. Leon Draisaitl, not that it's me changing it, but nothing has really changed in this race. Draisaitl 1, McKinnon 2. Vezina Trophy, it's really Hellebuck's award to lose. I have Logan Thompson in second because somebody does have to be second, and I think that person right now is still Logan Thompson. But this race isn't even close. Hellebuck way out ahead of the entire field. I think like in Vegas even backs that. Like I think second through fifth or sixth are closer in odds than first and second. Hellebuck's award to lose. Logan Thompson still having a good season. Just Hellebuck has had such a good year. He might be getting MVP votes, which I will go back to later. Norris Trophy, best defenseman. I think it's Cale Makar. He's been the best defenseman in the NHL for a while. It feels like this is always his award to lose, but I do have Zach Werenski officially passing Quinn Hughes. Werenski is, I would say, arguably the person chiefly responsible for the turnaround the Blue Jackets have had this year. I don't really have much else to say. He's just had a phenomenal season, and much like the Blue Jackets, has surprised everybody. And I think he has officially surpassed Quinn Hughes, at least for this season, in for second place. But again, as usual, it's Cale Makar's award to lose. Not that it's a blowout right now, but it's significant enough. Selke Trophy, the Selke Trophy, best defensive forward. Barkov, I think, is starting to separate himself from the rest of the field significantly. I think it's his award to lose. I think he's way out ahead. And then I have Nico Hischier finishing second. He's a guy I mentioned in third, my last update, and I have him moving up to second. And I think he's going to continue to get more time and more looks due to the Devils' injuries. Calder Cup, Macklin, Celebrini. I think he's starting to run away with it. The odds are starting to get higher and higher for him. Not that the odds mean everything. I just believe Celebrini has been consistently the best rookie in the NHL this year. And then I have Lane Hudson. I have passing Matvei Michkov. I think Lane Hudson's really started to come on for the Canadians and is a large reason why they're doing so well and are in the playoff hunt that they are in right now. Rocket Richard Trophy. This is not opinion. This is just factual based. Leon Draisaitl, Sam Reinhart right there. Leon Draisaitl is pulling way ahead, pulling way out on people. I don't know if anybody's going to catch him, especially on the pace that he's on. But I'll tell you what, 2 through 10 is really interesting because there's Sam Reinhart down to like 10th or 11th in goals are all super, super close. In fact, they're so close that Alex Ovechkin, a guy who missed significant time with an injury, has actually caught up with them. And now Ovechkin is at 33 goals. And Sam Reinhart, I think is, sorry, let me flip through my notes real quick. Sam Reinhart has like 32 or so. I think Sam Reinhart is on pace to finish second. But he's not right now. But honestly, props to Alex Ovechkin. I mean, in some respects, this is really what the point I was trying to arrive at. Leon Draisaitl is first place by a mile right now. Alex Ovechkin, despite all the time he's missed, is tied for second with 33 goals. Or tied for fourth with 33 goals, right? And then Draisaitl is way ahead at 46, and then their second and third are at 36 and 35. So like I said, Draisaitl is way away. But I mean, 12th to second is 6 goals, and first to second is 10 goals. That shows you the commanding lead Leon Draisaitl has. And really, in some ways, fortunate that Alex Ovechkin didn't play a whole season healthy, because that probably would have been the only way anybody would be close to him right now. Moving on. The Art Ross Trophy, I think that's Nathan McKinnon's this year, unless Draisaitl can catch up. That's going to be a close race to watch the rest of the year, and I look forward to it. Um, this is kind of, I don't know. These are always two of the top 4 or 5 contenders for this award, so it's no shocker that it's coming down to these two guys late in this season. The Jack Adams Award, Best Coach, I think this is Spencer Carberry's award to lose. I think he's far and away the leader in the clubhouse for it. And then you have John Hines, who I think if Spencer Carberry wasn't having this phenomenal season, this unexpected season, I think uh, John Hines would be getting talked about more. He's doing a great job. But I think this is, I say that I've been saying this a lot, but it's because truly there are a lot of blowouts happening in the NHL award races right now. Spencer Carberry it's his award to lose, and he's just way out ahead of the field. And then the President's Cup, I have it coming down to the Capitals and Stars. That's just based off of my predicted standings. I have the Caps at 115, the Stars at 114, and then the Jets at 113. I think those are the 3 most likely teams to win. That is it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoy. Let me know your feelings in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, please. It helps me so much as a creator. Let me know what you're thinking about the rest of this NHL season. Let me say, hey, Ben, you're an idiot. You're flat out wrong. Here's why. Hey, Ben, you're really smart. This is why. Anything in between. Let me know your thoughts and opinions for the rest of the NHL season. Let me know where you guys think it's going. Again, follow me on X, like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for taking times out of your days. Thank you for taking time out of your week to listen to me ramble and rant on as much as you guys do. I appreciate it. Tune in later this week for the next weekly NASCAR update. Have a good rest of your guys' days whenever you're listening to this, rest of your weeks. Peace.